When I was 19, I went to stay with my grandmother during spring break as I had last visited her 2 years prior. My mom had recommended me to go see her since I was going to college in a couple months. So during spring break, my mom drove me to visit her. My grandmother had lived alone in the city for some time after my grandfather had passed. Visiting her may have helped alleviate that loneliness and perhaps bring some joy into her life. After arriving, I was greeted by my grandmother, who immediately rushed over and hugged me. It was kind of an awkward moment because she was like hugging me for like more than 10 seconds and then talking about how muscular my leg was, and never mind. Honestly, after settling down, not a lot happened. My grandmother's house lacked good, viable Wi-Fi, and she rarely watched TV. I knew staying in the house all day was going to be boring, and that was not how I was going to spend my spring break. I decided to explore the city as I had never really ventured out and explored. I stepped out of my apartment and put on my headphones as I liked listening to music when I would go out for my morning walks. I remember walking around the city and admiring the various stores as well as the restaurants the place had to offer. After going around the city for some time, I noticed the direction I was heading had less and less people. I finally hit a dead end. On my left, I saw that there was an alleyway. Being unsatisfied with how many steps I was getting, I continued on, not thinking about the dangers ahead. As I walked further, I noticed the staircase leading down to what seemed to be a train station. Puzzled at first, I quickly determined it to be abandoned, as the stairs leading down were engulfed by internal darkness. Feeling uneasy, I began to head back towards the direction I came before I was interrupted by something. Confused, I took off my headphones and listened again. A scream. It caught me off guard. It seemed to be coming from the train station. I turned to hear a female scream out the words, "Help! They're here to get me." Panicked, I yelled back, "Who's there?" But no reply was given. Although I was nervous, being the good Samaritan I am, I decided to take a look. I proceeded down the stairs into the dark and damp staircase below. I tried to peer down there to see anything, but it was just too damn dark to see. It had been some time since I heard a voice. I was fearing the worst for her, and I began to pick up the pace. Suddenly, a voice broke the silence, and I was shocked by it as I heard it from my back. "The hell you doing over there?" I turned around to see an old woman standing at the top, beckoning me up. I walked back and asked her what was wrong. Instead of explaining, she began to yell at me for being dumb before explaining that a man a month earlier was lured down there and murdered. The words hit me hard. I was so confused at first before realizing the area was an alleyway, abandoned train station. No people around, just a disaster waiting to occur. Feeling embarrassed more than fearful, I thanked the woman and quickly headed back home. When I arrived, I did not tell my family about the incident and kept it to myself. In my mind, I thought to myself, what had just happened? What was that female voice I heard? What would happen if I had continued down the steps? Is cereal a soup? These questions had me up all night. One thing is, I am forever grateful for the old lady who saved me. I see you got on fresh beats. I was home alone one day, and I was making some instant noodles when I heard knocking at my door. At first I believed it to be my parents who had come back from work earlier, but I was surprised to see a man in his 20s standing at my door. I ignored it, continued to stare from the peephole. The longer I waited, the more aggressive the knocks became, and soon it turned into a bang before it finally ceased. I saw him walk away from the door and disappear into the dark night. Feeling bored, I headed back to the kitchen and added hot water to the meal before heading upstairs to pass time. As I waited, as I was playing on my phone, I was abruptly awakened by the sound of broken glass shattering downstairs. Terrified, I stayed in my chair and listened for the possible intruder. I reached for an old toy bag and mustered myself the courage to head down. I tiptoed slowly down the stairs, and as I moved closer, I began to hear a strange noise in the kitchen. With my weapon drawn, I approached the kitchen ever so cautiously, but I stopped as soon as I saw it. It was the man from earlier, and that rat bastard was indulging himself with my dinner. Being pissed off, I crept ever so quietly, and I knocked his bitch ass out. I kicked him a couple times, before concluding the man was out cold. I proceeded to call 911 and explain my situation to the operator. The operator told me to stay put and wait for the police to arrive. After 20 minutes, police arrived and 2 officers began to question me, which I responded to the best of my ability. The other 2 officers had to drag the still unconscious man out into the car. His face was still swollen from my kicks. I watched intently as they did. I thought about the reality of the situation that made me just shiver about it. Although the man had not seen my face as I had crept behind him when I knocked him out, I had this eerie feeling that he somehow knew who I was. One thing is for certain, this moment will be forever etched into my mind. I see you got on fresh beats. Just some context for you guys. I live in the suburbs of Delaware, in a small quiet town of around 10,000 people. Being such a small town, I've always viewed it as a safe place. 2 years ago, I remember walking home as I usually did, as my school was only a 10-minute walk away. Like any other day, I walked home after finishing up my club. I had headphones in to pass the time. As I plugged them in, I noticed a dark purple car behind me. I don't know why I took note of it, maybe because of its distinct color. Anyway, I didn't think much of it. While walking midway, for no apparent reason, I just turned my head around, and to my surprise, the same car was still behind me, in a faraway distance, but still behind me. Like again, I didn't think much of it, and walked into my neighborhood. As I walked further in there, I turned my head again, and to my shock, there it was, far, but behind me. Likewise before, I didn't take notice of it, and thought it was just a coincidence. That was until I made the several turns in directions towards my house, where I finally turned around, and to my horror, it was still behind me, far, but behind. It was just that I had realized the horrible truth. I was being followed. As I approached near my house, I quickly turned around and hid behind the tall trees near my neighbor's home. From there, I looked through the tiny cracks between the tree leaves. Sure enough, about 20 seconds later, the same purple car goes in and past my hiding spot. I believe I had tricked the driver into believing that I may have ran off. However, I still didn't feel safe, even now, and waited behind trees for about 5 minutes before walking next door and then heading to my house. Nothing happened later that day, or a month later. However, a thought has always lingered in my mind. What would have happened if I had not hid behind the trees? What horrible events was awaiting for me, Dad.